Hello and welcome to Kill Your Darlings, Berlinale Talents. I'm very happy to introduce this session with Susan Korda from New York. I'm the coordinator of the editing studio. The editing studio is the studio program for the first field of work editors selected for this year's talents. And Susie's the queen bee of the editing studio. So yeah, she is, Susie's an editor herself, of course. She's also a producer, a director, so she wears many hats. And she works a lot these days as a story consultant, dramaturgy, jumping in on projects, and yeah, advising in terms of story structure. So Susie is also a teacher. She does this masterclass amongst other pedagogical things at Columbia University and other schools. And yeah, you're gonna have a blast. Enjoy it. Susie, welcome.
Hi, welcome to the secrets of the editing room. You know, I was actually talking to somebody and saying, you know, really, the editing room is the big secret in the film industry. And the person said, yeah, everybody feels that way about their particular branch of or craft. But truly, I mean, and the editors here, I think, can confirm this. One of the reasons that it's more secret, I mean, that the editing process is a secret, is we don't really know what the fuck's going on. It just kind of happens. I mean, how many people here are editors? Thank you. Directors. And then directors who edit. Right? Screenplay writers. Screenplay writers who edit. Screenplay writers who feel that the editor fucks their film, including the director. Producers. Okay, producers who direct. Yeah, I mean, it's like we wear many, many hats, right? Actors. Actors who direct and edit. Oh my God, your own stuff? Your own, that's hard. Cinematographers. Cinematographers who direct. Okay, cinematographers who edit. Yeah, interesting, right? Yeah, Matthias, I see you there. Sound designers. And sound designers who feel that they're saving films from the editor and the rest of the team. And special effects. VFX. Yeah, oh, okay. Matthias, stop it. You have too many hats. Anyone that I did not mention? Who's here? Musicians, thank you. I always drop one, and it always feels like the most important. Musicians who also feel that they're saving the film through, coming up with a composition. And it definitely takes all of us. Who hates editing? Okay, well, I'm here. There are a few. Who loves editing? Oh God, are we? Now wait a second. This is like a room full of sufferers. Who suffers while they're editing? And you still love it. You got to think about that. So anyway, so my thing is that I don't think we need to suffer in the editing room, but it's truly where the chicken comes home to roost. But before we start, I just want to show you a clip from a film made by Vincent Minnelli in 1952. That was awarded many awards at the Academy Awards, which is not truly significant, except that it was a film about Hollywood. So I'm going to show you a scene, and I just caught it the other day on TCM in the States, and I was like, wait a second, it's like bad science in a sci-fi, where you just go, forget it, this can't work, but for the sake of good sound, for story and for drama, you're going to have it in there. So, build up, please. It's a very short clip. Thank you. Okay, so the editor's here. Do we understand it has no timing, no tension, no pacing? Excuse me, what do we do in the editing room? I mean, it's truly, just to move it forward, he does, he shelves his picture, he loses his studio. It's 1952, so of course we have to have the good old ego come forward and take over for the sake of the ego and not for the sake of the film. I just found that such a beautiful thing. Everybody is praised in this film, right? The cutting, the costumes, the story, the acting wasn't addressed, but we saw a little bit of that. I mean, Really? Really? I mean, the editor and me just sat there going, really? But it's a film about Hollywood and about the great falling. And so for me, that was just like a little piece of, this does not make sense. So I wanted to share that with you, but obviously, it's like, so what? It's a fun, does anyone here know that film? Great, so something to look forward to if you want to see Hollywood doing a film on Hollywood. But now we're going to go to the presentation. So that, to me, that's really important when we are in the editing room, to see what's working and not what's not working. And when there's so much working, it's usually the ego that gets in the way of saying, when it goes to extremes, like nothing's wrong with it or everything's wrong with it. So, and how do we actually evaluate this? How do we see it and how do we work with it? So this is called Kill Your Darlings. It is a title that comes actually from William Faulkner, who told the Nobel laureate writer from the southern states of America from the 30s, who admonished his students to kill their darlings, that not to get too attached to that one sentence, that one paragraph, that one section of dialogue, to be able to lose it in order, because when you're focusing on that one thing that you love, you're neglecting everything else, and it doesn't become organic and work together. But this is very hard in film, because in film, you've spent $50,000 on a Steadicam shot that you really love, and then what are you going to do? Shelve it? Well, actually, that's what Danny Boyles does, and he said, I think it was in 28 Days Later, he took his favorite shot, and he's very visceral, right? This is the same director who brought us Slumdog Millionaire and Train Spotting. He's like the Scorsese of that generation, very visceral camera. Doesn't storyboard, but just goes out there and grabs it, and then puts it together in the editing room. He had this beautiful shot, and he actually didn't even let it be in the editing room. He put it on the side. It was what I call sacrificing to the editing room gods. Please, gods, just let this come together well, because see, I'm giving up my favorite shot. You don't have to do that. I mean, that's a little bit voodoo-like, unless you have that special relationship to the editing room gods, and it works for you. But given that that's probably not the case, we're going to see what we need, which is, I like to say, awareness, acceptance, action. So a lot of people actually go from awareness, like that was out of focus, to action, I'm not going to use the shot. Acceptance is actually, so that's like ready, shoot, aim, right? We get reactive because it's there and we're just in this small space with or without an editor if we're doing our own editing, and we're enclosed and we get really anxious about that one thing, the mic being in the frame, or the out of focus, or the continuity here and there. And I'm covering all these things as we go on. I'm not going to be talking the whole time. We'll have a couple more film clips. So, and to really feel into it. So, and between acceptance, awareness and acceptance, there's usually a lot of angst and anger, avoidance. That's also there. But the acceptance is really where we want to reside, and which will inform our action. So one of the major things here is I find that people like to say they're showing, right? What are you doing with this film? I'm showing this, I'm showing that. And you know, with writing, it's like don't tell, show. But in the editing room, it's don't show, experience. So a lot of the time, the art of exposition is truly an art form, and we try to get it on the page, and then it's on the screen, and it's slow, turgid, not unfolding, but we really think it's necessary to let the action then unfold. We get very much caught on this, and a lot of that has to do with showing. So how do we go to experience? I don't know. Let me see what the next card says, right. This is what happens when you get into showing in the editing room. You're not actually experiencing your footage. You're reading it as if it were an essay, right? So you're actually talking down to the audience, and you are messing with your rhythms. Because when you're in the experience of it, you're actually in this dance and in this movement. We are in the editing room, every man's audience, every woman's audience. Or as somebody said earlier today, the avatar of the audience. Yeah, so does a composer show an audience a piece of music? It's more musical. Actually, I find that editing is actually much more musical than it is pictorial. It has this flow to it, given the movement in the shot, given the movement from shot to shot, dialogue, everything that goes into it. It's quite a flow. So editing's like composing. Basic misconceptions. Continuity is of primary importance. Match cutting is essential to making a film work. Story always needs to be clear and motivations understandable and logical. How many people agree with this up until this moment where I'm telling you shouldn't think like that? Right? No? Okay, we're beyond that? That's good. So it's good not to, there's something else. We get in the editing room, what I find is that people get what I call creative autism. You know, with an autistic person, everything comes in at the same valence. Whether it's the buzz from this monitor, my voice here, somebody breathing next to you, it's coming in at the same valence. And then we're trying to juggle that and make all those different things work. And it's like storytelling. When you do that in storytelling, you have a barge that's moving through water slowly because it doesn't have a prow. And it's kind of boring to watch. And that's how the film actually will reflect those concerns when you're really cutting for these things like continuity, match cuts. I even have a theory about match cuts that if you spend so much time, does anyone have that experience? You spend so much time on one cut, it almost, because it's a live material, it almost like takes on the energy. So you're watching it and then it kind of bumps at you because it took on this crazy energy that you had focusing like a maniac. And I don't know if you know this, but I mean, probably a lot of you do, but never look at a cut over and over and over again. You go back 10 cuts. You go back to the beginning of the scene, else you're going to be driving yourself crazy. Sorry. So another way of approaching this is being like a child. We play. That's why we don't have to be, are children anxious when they play? Well, I guess some are, but usually in relationship to another kid. When we play, we're actually discovering and relaxed and curious. Because without the curiosity, with trying to be, you can't be curious and be right at the same time. Ever notice that? Those two things can't usually live together, right? Because if you're right and you're curious, like, why am I right? Then you're not right anymore because you're curious about what you've taken a step back and going, what's motivating that? So, this was my dog, Rabiger. He was a very good rabbi to me, and this is him in the snow. And then he died, and then my cousin's 12-year-old did that. So that's how he dealt with his sorrow. But another thing about play is, I don't know what they're going to do today, but it's like, you're green, yes, and you're red, and together we could be Christmas. Oh, get out of here. Christmas only comes once a year and we're together and I don't want to only see you once a year. I want to be together. Oh, get away from me. I want to be Christmas today, right? And I could keep on doing this and you're going to be seeing two people who are really like a red top and a green top arguing about if they're going to spend the rest of their lives together. Never! Or are they going to just be together on Christmas? It's important to get to that place of just play and seeing you don't know. An inexperienced editor is usually an editor who says the cut won't work. And God gave us digital to make the edit. Before then, it was really like on the Steamback, I remember putting together something and the director wanted something, to change it. And then you go, yeah, we could do that. It'd take about 3 days and then 3 days to get it back to how it was. And then, the subtext of that is ka-ching. You're paying me. You really want to go down that route? You're trying to manipulate them. Now we don't have to do that. Now, the director can sit on his own Avid or Final Cut or Adobe Premiere or whatever it is. Maybe I'll ask you that question later, what you guys are working on these days. Okay, there it goes. So, let's see what's next here. Walter Murch. Dr. Professor Dr. Walter Murch. Anyone know this blink of the eye? Who's read it? Right? And then you didn't feel alone anymore, right? I'm not alone. So he gave us 6 points to cut for in his book, In the Blink of an Eye, which I would recommend, because he's got many theories. And this is the 6 points you cut for, and he said, from the top down. So let's explain what these things are. I'll just put them all up here. Okay, emotion, performance, truth everybody's seen a documentary where some expert has come on screen, but there's kind of slimy and not believable, and you have another expectation, and the production never addressed that, and by the end of the film, you got some information, because it is a documentary, but you're like, huh? I didn't really, yeah, whatever. You know, next, what are we gonna binge watch today? Story and plot. The difference between story and plot is, this is from E.M. Foster, plot is the queen is dead, the king is dead. Story is the queen is dead, the king died of a broken heart. So we understand the emotional underpinnings of what goes on in story. Rhythm, energy in relation to story, and then some. Eye trace. Everybody know what the 180 is? The camera axis. Who does not know? I can do it really fast. Okay, so if there are two people speaking here, right, and the camera's shooting us here and then here, in order for us to be looking at each other, the camera has to be on this side. This 180 is then, unless I turn around, the rule, and if we jump here because of a turn, then we can continue the scene. But if you shoot from here and then cut from this side, you're going to have two people looking in the same direction opposed to looking at each other. That's the basic thing about the 180. And it's a devilish thing, mostly at a table scene. So it's table scenes that are really beautiful up until the 90s, where they decided they had to do something about this, so they created moving cameras. Mostly like, I think, Reservoir Dogs loved that at the beginning. But then it is some as well as to how the eye in the West travels like a Z across the screen very quickly. So you might be putting something there in your production design, and your audience won't see it that quickly, and you'd have to hold longer, which of course then affects your rhythm. Two-dimensional space is composition. When something's bump, when you're cutting from a light scene to a dark scene, it will bump you, right? These are just ways of understanding what's going on and figuring out then how to proceed so you can take the right action. Three-dimensional space is spatial continuity. Now we're going to see what Walter Murch says about, do we have it here, or do we have the, yes, it is here. This was tongue-in-cheek, but he meant it on purpose. Dr. Professor Walter Murch. Continuity gets a whopping 4%. And none of these equal 51% of what emotion is. So when you're there and you are vertiginous, you know, you're almost vomiting because it's so like you have no idea anymore what to follow, because you've been fucking with continuity and you think the eye line needs to be correct, or the focus, you have to cut away from the shot before it gets out of focus because that will disturb the audience. This is all wrong, because not that those aren't elements that are there, but following that creates that autistic kind of decision making. What you want to do is just go, what am I feeling? And in order to know what you're feeling, as we had today, this morning, a wonderful improv, you need to really get in touch with your body. It really helps you. I mean, did you ever notice that when you're really anxious and you're like all caught up in here, if you actually start feeling the rest of your body, the anxiety lessens, because your body is actually giving it space and you're not keeping it all up here thinking it's up here. So you can get up in the editing room. Drinking water is very essential. I mean, look, if suffering is your thing, and I think we already established that some of us here do like to suffer, I don't want to take that away from you. Please go ahead. If that's your process, really, I mean, that's your process. I mean that seriously. Everybody has their own different processes, and that becomes then an interesting, dynamic of what you experience with your director as an editor, or with your editor as a director. And the producer also needs to have this overview of what is happening in this very, very rich, but really pressurized, even though it's the longest time you usually spend on a film, except for perhaps the writing. And it's not a rule, but I mean, that's usually the case, certainly in documentary. You want to be able to understand what's flowing here and how to release the tension, or to get the motivation going and get the happiness or the curiosity, which is associated with happiness. So Molly Stensgaard, who's part of our editing team here, she has a wonderful way, and she works with one of the most difficult directors, even though she says he's really not that difficult, but Lars von Trier, right? So what they have is they have a goodie list, a goodie sequence. They don't say anything bad when they're looking at rushes. They just pull, they do markers on what's good. They talk about what's good, and then all that gets collected into a goodie sequence. Doesn't that sound great? Instead of like, because also the smarter we are, we think that smart is associated with the ability to criticize. Bad for the little kid that needs to play. Really bad, it limits you. You just need to play. You got, what happens when this goes up? Oh, well, look, the subtext was there that he really hated her, but actually that performance has love in it. And if we start with the love and go to the hate, and then it comes, oh, wow, we can give it another little turn that the script didn't have, but this one moment where she turns and looks, he leaves the room, and she turns and looks in the mirror, and that wasn't planned, but oh wow, look, what does that add to us now? So the moving from the space of two characters speaking to each other to the space of the audience knowing something that the characters don't know, and we're gonna see that next in a little bit of Bonnie and Clyde. So this, I think, is just everybody's go-to in the editing room, just sit there. Also in writing, you know, what is the emotion? I mean, there it's a little bit more difficult because there you really play God. By the way, writers, you do know that, right? You are God. You are the real creative artists because you create something out of nothing. Everybody else is just an interpretive artist, including the director, unless he's also, or she's also the writer. So hats off to the truly taking the blank page and making it into something. So now we're going to look at the first 10 minutes of Bonnie and Clyde. Everybody knows the story, right? Two people who became bank robbers. What you maybe don't know about it was that Jean-Luc Godard at one point had the film, as did Truffaut. It was Warren Beatty's first outing as a producer, and I think the only, was Guthrie, the only person who was experienced on that set was the DP. And you'll be seeing, well, I want you to watch out for what bumps you, whether it's continuity, whether it's focus, just try to track in 10 minutes what's bumping you. And the trick question here is, why does the music start where the music starts? On the credits, so we start with the credits. Hello? Yeah, okay, so Jack Warner saw this film in 1967, and when he didn't like a film, he would go and take a pee, and he took many pee breaks on this one, and when he came back, he said, and this is a quote, he said, "That is the worst piece of shit editing I've ever seen." Dede Allen, who also went on to work many films with Lumet, who was known to actually grease pencil his film already in advance for the editors, and V. Coates, who won an Academy Award for David Lean's Lawrence of Arabia, did work on a film with Lumet, and the assistant told me the story later on. He would come in and he would tell where she should make these cuts, and the assistant said to her, "Mrs. Coates, why are you here allowing this guy to use you as a pair of hands?" And she went, "Hey, no, it's New York. I get to go shopping and I get paid. 6 months, why not?" But Dede wasn't like that. Dede actually would go in at 6:30 in the morning and do some cuts, like on the Pacino film, why am I blanking? Attica. Dog Day Afternoon, thank you. And she would come in, he would come in at 9:30, and she'd say, "Well, it's just, you know, I mean, we've done this before, right? I just played a little bit. Oh, let me see it." And he liked it. And he also writes about her in the book Making Movies, where if you're really an editor, you don't have a style because you're actually responding to the footage and what is there in that individual story and unfoldment. So I want to go back to the question, why did the music start where the music started? Shout out, if you will, yeah? Excuse me? Here, catch this. Speak into it.
When they were making out? You mean in the car?
No, the very beginning.
Okay, so that I don't know.
That you don't know. Toss it back.
Sorry.
The title of the film?
Yeah, it comes up around the title of the film. That's why they wanted it to come up. It sneaks up.
Yeah.
Yeah?
This is really cool. Well, before there were these pictures, and you were seeing these pictures of the Great Depression, and once the music starts, you get this other feeling, you know, and it gets it transferred to the
Yeah, but why does it start where it starts?
I don't remember.
Starts on the title, yeah? Toss it that way.
There's a picture of a man and a woman there in a kind of a romantic position, and it almost feels like they're on a date, and it gives a new romantic edge to the previous depression that was there.
This is all correct, but I'm just going to answer it now because there's a lot to cover. It starts where it starts because they wanted it to end where it ended, right? It sneaks in. It starts at the middle of a song. They wanted it to end where it ended. Sometimes this is just what we do, right? It doesn't have to be perfect. They snuck it in. It just kind of bevels up, and then it ends where it ends. If you notice, it ends also on her lips, right, where she's doing, right? Usually what a woman does when she's looking in a mirror. But she turns to the mirror, right? So anyone on set who ever told you that doesn't make sense, tell them to fuck off. Nothing makes sense. You're going for emotional content, and you know, unless no one is seeing this stuff off camera that most of us are seeing. And in the attempt to be perfect, we tend to actually, you know, it's the enemy of the good, right? There's another sequence of perfection leads to procrastination, which leads to paralysis, right? So if we ever get caught in that loop, we need to be careful about it. It's like, it's not perfect, but what is real? What is emotionally touching you? It's all you need to know. When I start on a documentary with people, I ask them their top 10 or 20 favorite moments. It could be a look, it could be a whole moment of a race car driving event, or it could be a line of dialogue. But that, to me, as the editor, becomes like the connect the dots. Remember when we were kids and we used to connect dots to make a picture? I'm beginning to understand what is moving the director. I know what moves me, but I'm not making my film on their material, and that's very, very essential. I'm collaborating with somebody else's vision, and I'm sure a lot of it is also going to bleed into each other. But anyway, one of the conceits in Bonnie and Clyde was that Arthur Penn, and this was his third outing, his first was The Miracle Worker, which was also what he put on stage, which is about Helen Keller as a child, a wonderful piece of film. And then he did Mickey 1 with Warren Beatty, and then Warren then hired him to do this, and they would argue all the time. The big conceit was that he had, with Guffey, he came up with one shot, one take, one shot scenes. So what you see there in the first scene was one long camera movement. And later on in the film, if you look at it, you'll see other moments where they held it more, right? So one of the things that Jack Warner was saying was piece of shit was that 1967, those kind of jump cuts, you may, maybe in the experimental films from the East Coast, but this is not something that was Hollywood and wasn't acceptable. You noticed the jump cuts. So let's just, where did it bump you? Where did the film bump you? Yeah. So it was a jump cut, right? So that bumped you, right? Early jump cut. Anything else? Did it throw you out of the picture?
I just wanted to add to this, like in one when she was like going down and next she was going up, so like
right. Down and up. So what's her emotion in that scene? Ennui, boredom, right? Because if it were depression, it would just be flatlining, right? And sitting there with some Haagen-Dazs or any kind of ice cream that of your choice, right? But this is like, well, I could do, right? She did a great performance. I'm sure she did a great performance in the whole long take. But it's not only about making that one scene work, it's also after she goes down the stairs, by the way, that interstitial moment of dressing, right? Quickest dressing on, truly, to this day in Hollywood films. And she clunks down the, did you notice that her shoes changed, by the way, when she hits the street? Who noticed? Who noticed continuity? Okay, it's okay. You were asked to do that, right? Did it take you out of the film? No, right? I mean, this is one of the wonderful things, is that when we're constantly being with the emotion, okay, we're also seeing really two beautiful people, right? So when they're walking down the street together, right, what do? But you're a movie star, you know, waitress, or no, cleaning lady or something. It's like, what do you think I am, waitress? How do we know that he's right? Who has been here before, by the way? Who's seen this lecture before? Good. Stop it. Okay, how do we know she's a waitress? Body language. Who says performance? Raise your hand. I can make everybody raise their hand simply by, in the end, saying, who didn't raise their hand, please raise your hand, and then I can get everybody, the shy ones, to raise their hand. Okay, some people say performance. What else? It's, okay, you got that, yeah? It was written in the beginning, right? So this takes us to another point of storytelling and unfoldment. You know, by the way, when we attack editing, we're attacking all the disciplines that go into making a film. That is one of the great things about this place of unfoldment of story. I mean, for me, it's just a marvel what I keep on learning and what keeps on revealing itself. So we're going to now address this aspect of story that Benton and Newman did a great job on. Oh, here I have it in my pocket. So this comes from the theater, right? These are the basic, I mean, how many of you, I'm going to go backtrack a little bit. Sometimes you cut to something. This is about showing, by the way. You cut to something and your audience doesn't perceive it. And you go, but I showed it. Right? This is the problem with showing. You're showing it, but you're not actually bringing the choreography of perception into it. This is one of the elements of perception. And I'll simplify it. Proscenium stage, curtains open, there's a whole desk and living room, and it's a little bit disorderly, and somebody else walks in. That's the foundation. And when they walk in, they go to the desk, and on the desk, then you see, if you hadn't seen it already, is a gun. Right? Then somebody else comes in all angry, and then you're like, oh shit. That is the understanding that the gun is going to go off, besides the fact that we know if there's a gun, it always has to go off. Except right in the, when it goes off becomes then the art of it. So basically you have foundation, which was in this case, the title card that said she worked in a cafe. It didn't say she was a waitress. It said she worked in a cafe, right? And then you have the recognition, which is when she's walking down there. And then the understanding comes where? In the cafe when they're sitting there and the waitress walks up. Okay, you're good. Where else? By the way, that's a beautiful split that they did in that scene, right? The one where you're better than this. By the way, that's also one of those wonderful scenes where, like, I don't know, in film school, you get a lot during writing, you have to know whose scene it is. Whose fucking scene is that? Right? When he gets out of the car and says, I'm not no lover boy, right? I mean, it ends on her scene and she's being reeled in. The camera's doing that too. He's walking back, she's walking towards, the camera's truly reflecting the emotional underpinning of what Clyde is doing in that scene. But they're splitting the scene from, it's a falling in love scene, right? Split in two. And revealing more about character. Clyde is known to have a prescience, to know what's going to happen next. He's very good at getting out of, I mean, in real life, he was an incredible mechanic and could drive those cars and fix them and move through the states. But in this one, it's truly that he sees things before. So he's talking to her and saying, when you were 16, no 17. Another beautiful scene to analyze because, sorry. Because in her correcting him once, and it's the only time they really cut to her, saying something, right? She says things before, but he says, and you put on your pink uniform, and then white, it's white. Right, but so we know that in the scene before that, when he's at the car, you're better than being a waitress. But you did pick on something. Then, so now I'm going to jump a little bit. Why does he have her change her hair? Who saw it? Raise your, don't say what it was, but those of you who know, who saw it? You raised your hand, right? And the rest of you are thinking, what the fuck is she talking about? What is it? Right? Okay. That's that, that's this, that's this.
You born somewhere?
Who saw it? This is eye trace. This is eye trace. Remember the 180 degree and more? This is eye trace. Now, he did a great job, Penn. He wanted to camouflage this. So he brought us big eyes, big teeth. Top of it, he put gum in her mouth. So we are totally distracted. And the spit girl, which is what that is called, is on the other side of the face than on Bonnie. How many of you didn't see it? Right. So think of them. They're in the editing room. Always go back to the editing room. They're in the editing room. They thought it's like, and no one sees it. And you're showing it, and no one's seeing it, and you're thinking, we fucked. What could they do? Well, they could intercut it, taking away from this energy between Bonnie and Clyde. They could hold on it longer, right? Which is the rhythm gets fucked up, right? And you might as well then just really take an arrow and go, hello. Seeing it? I mean, we all make those films in a way when we're in the editing room. It's like, oh, look at that. Ooh, really shitty. Good. We learned this morning that, next to a really shitty idea, very often nestles a really good idea. So you have to really, it's a humbling, that's why it's spiritual for me. It's such a humbling place. Because it's like, yay, oh, fuck, oh, okay. So Benton and Newman, they did it perfectly, right? They gave you the title card, they gave you this walk. By the way, I'm going to, because it addresses all these different disciplines, I'm always like cycling back. So let's cycle back a little bit to the opening scene, which I might actually be able to go back to a little bit. That jump cutting, because of that, all that choreography and keeping that scene would have worked fine. Except then they had that scene down when they're walking together, and that's a minute long. So another thing, of course, that affects editing is always how it unfolds more. So when you that's why we have Kill Your Darlings. If you get attached to that opening scene because of the choreography or because of, Danny Boyle's Steadicam shot or whatever it is, and you're blind to, and we all do this. We do this in writing, composer. There's one composer here, if more. We do this in composing, right? We do it all the time. And we remember in film school, you'd have that one scene that inspired you, and then all the other scenes are little like sticks holding up that one scene, and your professor is saying, could you just do the rest of the story? Because that's another way to look at it. What you love will not go away. And on top of it, God gave us digital. It never goes away. Not really, yes, really, it really goes away, but not really in this way. So then I just want to address, any questions? Yes, let's get you where are you? Here, catch. Whoop.
Hi. So if we didn't really capture this waitress with this curly thing, although we didn't, but isn't it like an unconscious kind of capturing that moment, do you think?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And thank you. They could have cut the scene without the spit curl, right? But then he would have been like Svengali. Because underneath it all, at least this is my interpretation, underneath it all is that she's falling in love. And when do we fall in love? Usually we fall in love when we feel seen the way we want to be seen. And she's being seen. She's not this waitress. She's really special. He's seeing that in her. And I mean, it's totally easy to cut without the waitress. You know, it could just come, the burger could come, and then he's just looking at her. But it's not even about seeing it, it's just about understanding that he's taking in information as well, right? I mean, we don't have to, and that's really important when you start beginning to ask yourself, what are you feeling? I'm feeling the love, I'm feeling her, she's going from like, to, I love that burger, by the way. I always want a burger after I see that. It's like, you know, and she's just aglow. And that is the trajectory of that first act, right? So then it's just a matter of choice. It's like, I liked it, I wanted it. She's my wife with the big teeth. I don't know, you know, it could be anything. But what's important is that it's in the flow and not stopping, right? So the two things that would stop, it's holding it longer. Another way of holding it longer is to intercut it. And the rest, I don't know. They never wrote about it. They just had a whole theory about, because it really took them a long time, given Hollywood schedules, when they cut this. I'm just going to start this and figure out how to do this. So little things, just to, you know, also the little things that we really love. So that's her turning there. Okay. Now that is her POV shot, right? This is something else we always get attached to, too. I mean, this, I guess, is basically what I want to say is like, kill your darlings, no attachments. It's a POV shot, right? But we see it before she sees it. Doesn't have to be cut that way. If it were cut the way that she's there, goes to the window, we see him, then when she sees him, the film might as well be called Bonnie and ... Clyde, right? Everything from her point of view is not necessarily helping the story. There's an incredible dynamic that we get, and we get it in suspense films and in horror films, when we, as an audience, actually know more than the character. And even if it's just a beat ahead. Because what you're doing is you're actually opening up this narrative space. I mean, I'm interpreting this, but this is something that the more and more you're working something and going, it feels claustrophobic, and then you realize sometimes we have rules that we don't even know that we made up, like this shot can only go there, or you can't have two close-ups cut together, or whatever it is. And you're forced, when you're actually really evaluating what is landing, and I'm going to end this, the Kill Your Darlings, with how to do feedback screenings, which I'm really a big believer in, but not for selling purposes, but for really understanding how your film is landing. Because we get, you know, the director gets very anxious about this and that. How many people saw the out of focus on Clyde? Where did you see it most? All the close-ups, right? Pretty much, right? From the gas station to when he's at the car, certainly in the, I mean, there's a whole shot in there, by the way. You know, when he's talking in the cafe to Bonnie, where his eyes are just not in focus, right? Did it take you out of the film? Yeah? Kind of back there. Right. Would have you walked out of the theater if you paid a ticket? Spoken like a real distributor. And this, of course, is just so we have her POV. We're just going to play it. Tell me what the sound is. Can we turn up the sound just a little bit in the background? Up with the sound.
Hey, boy, what you doing with my mama's car?
That's great, right? It's like I call it cracking open a moment. Again, when we're showing, we tend to show her looking and then calling and then the back. But there is this moment where we have this shot here where the audience is thinking, is she naked? And then we have him. Did we see him before or do we see him now? Is she naked? Right? Look at that look. This is where I like to say, like, good editing, good storytelling is like this anyway, but editing does this moment to moment. It's like good editing is like good sex. you actually provoke an expectation in your audience they don't even know they have. It's like, ooh, oh my God, what's he doing with my toe? You know? And then you fulfill it. Then you fulfill it. So it's not like here, see, like this. It's like, may I touch you, by the way? How do you like to be touched? I mean, and kissed? I mean, if we talk about it a little bit, then maybe you can really, then I'll do it right? And then you'll get it right, and then we can be together. And it's like nobody wants to make love to Woody Allen, and not only because he's a pedophile, right? I mean, we don't want to make story like that, right? We're sitting there going, will they understand that? Do they get it? Do they see it? It's like, fuck, do you feel it? If you're feeling it, they'll get it. Something at least, you know, and then you'll figure it out as it goes on. And they pay us good money, by the way, or they should at least, because one of the biggest tricks that we have to do as editors and as filmmakers sitting around in an editing room, whether we're the producer or the director, is that we have to be tabula rasa. We are, and I actually do this a little bit later on there, we're like actors. We know what's coming next, but we have to be in the moment as if we don't know what's coming next, but feel it. Actors know their dialogue, but they have to be in the moment to be in the dialogue, to color the dialogue with the truth of that character in that scene, in this moment, in this now. I mean, this is what we're trying to do. Mati. Oh, we could do this a long time, actually. We had too much time this morning together, so it's like, it's not making him uncomfortable, and I'm certainly not uncomfortable. But you know, this moment will never happen again. And it's just the preciousness of the moment. That's what we try to bring to screen. That this thing can only happen now, in this moment. And we use a lot of artifice. But that, and I'm feeling it. Are you feeling it? I get goosebumps. Well, maybe you're not getting goosebumps, but I'm getting goosebumps. I mean, that truth is really so marvelous to achieve. And we don't achieve it when we're thinking about it. We achieve it when we just actually allow ourselves to play. We contain multitudes, to quote a famous poet from Brooklyn, whose name I'm blanking on, with a W. Come on. Okay. I will move ahead here. Any questions on this? Oh yeah, there's one more thing that I actually love to point out besides, let's look at some stuff here. First of all, we're going to look at her clunkers for a moment. Look at these clunkers. Come on. Oop, see, I knew that was going to happen. That always happens. Okay. So we're going to look at the clunkers, and then we're going to, that's that 1 minute scene. Now look at her shoes. They look like the old kind of airline slippers they used to give you. Production design, we see her being caged. We see it in the first scene. We see it here with the hoses, just to do a shout out at production design. His eyes, of course, he's also out of focus. This shot. That's the first time we go wide, and we all felt it, right? We all felt it. It's really great when you hold off on a wide shot. I mean, it makes sense to have it here because it's also when they're going from this very intimate flirt into the big wide world and being robbers, right? This is the first movement. But it really just, it creates a space. So that's another thing to keep it. I mean, even though we're really being in truthful moment, there are all these other facets of reality that we get to build in or play with or just we're experiencing. It's like, yeah, cool. Wow. And there's another jump cut in here. I don't know if you saw this jump cut. While they're already having fun. Watch it on Clyde.
Hey, what's your name anyhow?
Clyde Barron.
See it? Who didn't see it? Goes so fast. They just let the sound go and they cut the picture. I mean, it's just, and they did it because they're in a hurry, right? We don't have to see everything, but it's fun to, I mean, look, you know, This is what I really love. Oh, look, she's even smiling. She agrees. Watching films is our homework. How fucking good can it get? I mean, we thought, somebody today said, you know, they thought they could just go to movies. They didn't realize that they could have a career out of being part of it. I had that too. It's like, whoa, you mean I can do something I really love? Shit. Oh, fuck. Okay, so I'm going to, we have that. And now I'm going to, another little fun, you know the story about Jaws? By the way, who hasn't seen Jaws? Okay, well, there's a shark. You will not see it here. Who knows about, okay, the backstory on Jaws was that Spielberg went to shoot this film. He had like 6 weeks. I think he had 28 days of rain, something crazy like that. They were still writing the script while they were on location shooting. In fact, one of the production line producers said that they were actually, did something criminal when the insurance people came, and they said that they were on schedule, on time. Richard Dreyfuss saw Spielberg on the plane, leaving the B team for the final shots of what happens in the story, and he was convinced, knowing Spielberg, that he was having a nervous breakdown. Spielberg was convinced that he would never work in Hollywood again. He didn't only have one mechanical shark that didn't work; he had 2 mechanical sharks that didn't work. Verna Fields was the editor. They ended up calling her Mother Cutter. Talk about kill your darlings, right? And she was the one, supposedly, who really came up with an understanding that to make it suspenseful, let's not see the shark as long as possible. So you don't see the shark until the 3rd act. But they had to stitch in a presence of this thing, this mindless killer. Now, for those of you who have seen it, this is a scene that comes after The Day at the Beach, which had some fun lens stuff where there's on Roy Scheider, the sheriff. And then you have, I mean, the scene starts beautiful. I don't have it here, but it's really this fat lady in I mean, she looks like from a silent era film with this kind of swimming garb that they used to wear back in the teens of the last century. And I mean, it's just comedic, and at the same time, it's like, okay, there's lunch, but she's not lunch. It ends up being a kid and a dog that ends up being lunch. And so the town council is coming together, and we're going to see it from there. So we could talk continuity. Where do we see continuity? Something off? Anyone want to shout out? Right. They'd gone to dusk, and then they were going back to. So basically what they had in the script was that he was looking at the book, and they were preparing the showing, right, for when she walks in, and that he's scared, right? So we were relating it through him. But then they needed to change it because we really needed that scene, which we were going to now analyze a little bit without, right? We're going back to the editing room. In the editing room, they did not have Williams' score. John Williams does not write music. I mean, he'll write it to get a taste of it, but he won't put it to picture without picture. He's very, very old-fashioned, particular that way, however you want to look at it. So I know from somebody who worked with him. So here we have, I like the scene, even though I know it's hard to hear, but I just want to look at this camera movement. See what it's doing? It's swimming in. Spoiler alert, he's the only one who gets killed by a shark, right? First time we meet Quinn, and the camera during his, that's Spielberg. He loves the camera playing with, right? That's where camera is taking over subtext. Now in this scene, we're going to do it without sound. Let's just play her.
I value my neck more than $3,000, Chief.
So people usually hate this kind of thing. If we look at the shots, how they're cut together, they feel, right? Moving shot to still shot to moving shot moving shot. Now let's back up a little bit, and now we'll have some sound. Because there's a jump here, actually, in the, they took away dialogue. The sheriff basically said he would go along, but instead of having the dialogue, they turned it into a subtext. So let's listen.
For 10. You gotta make up your minds. You wanna stay alive and ante up? You wanna play it cheap? Be on welfare the whole winter. I don't want no volunteers. I don't want no mates. There's too many captains on this island. $10,000 for me by myself. For that you get the head, the tail, the whole damn thing.
Thank you very much, Mr. Quint.
Okay, this is something that took me basically years till I recognized it. They reversed the end of this. He had left, and then the scene is him looking past the door. And then we're going to cut to him getting up and leaving. Why do that? I mean, you think, like, I mean, come on, can't you just let a scene rest? Most writers are like, hey, come on, there's a purpose for that, right? Well, but the purpose is that we need to constantly be aware, and that's why writers be a little bit more understanding. They don't necessarily shoot it like that, but in the editing room, you begin to realize that you need transitional moments are magical. They're magical. They contain, so going out and going into a scene is really like, it has every cut, you could say, has that. That's why when you're trying to match cut, by the way, going back to match cuts, that match cut does not really work. They're either overlaps or ellipses if you actually analyze them. So it's not, so when you're trying to get the right match, like my hand is over here, and, or on a doorknob, and then whatever, you're just going to drive yourself crazy. But it is a rite of passage. How many people have spent 7 hours getting a match cut going? On a Steamback? 5 hours on digital? Come on. Come on, be honest. Yeah, okay. So here what it is, I'm just going to play the end of the scene where we've met Quinn. We see that there's a relationship between him and the sheriff. He's going to do it alone. They took out the line of dialogue, like, it's like, I'm just doing it, right? And you could feel it. You could feel that the subtext there was, he was reading the sheriff going, you can't do this alone. I'm doing it alone. But you didn't have to hear the dialogue of it. And then the end, so we're seeing he's already left. So let's just play it. Oops. Oh, look. Why is it there? Okay, let's see if this works.
Alex Kintner is the kid who was missing at the beach. His mother says it was a shark.
Thing.
Thank you very much, Mr. Quint.
See?
We'll take it under advisement.
Mr. Mayor, Chief, ladies and gentlemen.
Right? So it's about, basically, it's the beginning of a relationship between these two men. This allows us to, if you put if you get him getting up and saying goodbye, and then cut to him, and then we could hear the mayor just saying that. But there's also something very special about going to the wide shot, right? It is a community meeting, closing off that little arc in there, and it allows you to go from this. I mean, that captain is roguish, right? I mean, he's truly like from the parody-like, right? And that's this wonderful side angle, but close up, and then to him, right? So that you get the mayor closing that, and it's just the relationship between the two men, opposed to the way it was written and shot, which is he gets up, he leaves, the mayor says his thing, and then we're back on our protagonists. And again, this has to do with balancing the characters. I mean, they all come together with the Dreyfus character at the end, right? Again, if it were only Bonnie's POV, it would be Bonnie and ... Clyde. So that's what we're doing a lot in the editing room. We're trying to balance energies and chemistry. Let's go to Thelma and Louise in our minds. Let's go to Brad Pitt. Remember when he enters? Remember when he leaves the first time? Remember that, like, oh, couldn't we just go with him? I know you're beautiful, ladies. Susan Sarandon and Gina Davis, please. But there was something about Brad at that moment. Come on. Yes? Show of hands. Okay. Guys too? Yes. Right? And then he gets arrested and he's hauled into court. I love you, baby, anyway. I don't know what he says. And it's like, oh, he's gone. Right? That's chemistry. You can't do anything about it. In the Cut, Jane Campion, Mark Ruffalo, and Meg Ryan. Meg Ryan is everybody's little darling, but she ain't sexy. She's cute, but she ain't sexy. She's got him handcuffed to a radiator in an East Village apartment in Manhattan, and they're making love. Analyze the scene. It's on him. He's sexy. You know, they cut to her as needed, but, you know, it's really getting the juice is getting it from him. No one is sitting there watching the film going, aren't they on him too much? Not unless you've seen it 20 times and then you're really analyzing it, because beforehand you're just like, oh, I can smell him now, yes. Right, then we have this scene. Now this scene was intercut with, I've got to play, first of all, Spielberg is never good with women, right? The guy is afraid of water. There's water all around him, including a wife who's dressed in tie-dyed shirt and a blue bandana. So it's like, Spielberg definitely has issues with women. So we get introduced. We get the ha-ha, right? The good old Spielberg making something serious into something family comedic, right? He loves the family. Then we have the scene. Why they even have this dissolve, I don't know, but they do. Nothing here, this was all post-written. None of this is sync sound, they post-wrote it. So then you also have the, right, they throw it in, the roast, and then we hear this.
Come and get it!
Clyde's taking it right out.
Can't we go home?
Can't we go home? They just threw it in. They've just gone fishing for I mean, he puts it in there so that he could have it at the other end, right? Can we go home now? Does it make sense? Is it logical? If you're sitting there going, does this make sense? You won't write it. But it doesn't have to. I mean, it has to. I mean, the guy's an oofus, okay? So now we have an oofus. An oofus says, you know, is impatient and is going to think that, you know, he's asking permission for things that he knows he's not going to be doing anyway. Notice, okay, so we're going to play it. I'm going to talk a little bit over it. Music starting, right? Everybody who thinks about where to start music and it's too obvious, this is what it's like a match cut. Just don't be on the nail on the head. Start before, start it after, play with it. It's not like it doesn't work because, and very often a composer will say, oh, no, like, you know, try it over there, or go into the middle of the piece. Play with it, because it's a fluid thing and it will inform you, but don't judge it. Really with music, I think most importantly, in the whole process, to you, Sabina, judgment does not help. So I'm going to turn down the audio, please. So let's look at these shots. This is what they're looking at in the editing room. And they're trying to create a threatening scene. That's a delayed reaction. So look, it's going out there. Oh, look at this. I mean, that truly proscenium across horizontal. 2 men fall into the water. Right? Okay, is he drowning? No, he's not drowning. Okay. And it's going out to sea. And we're going to listen to it again then with the music, because it's fascinating what he does there with the music. The water line is partly the threatening thing. Okay, now it turns around. Now this could get really, and we know the other guy is screaming. Okay, we can get the others. Come on, he's coming after you now, he's coming after. Come on, don't stop, don't look behind you. And then we have the shot. It's like, oh wow, that's really threatening. I mean, it's hard to make water threatening, it's true. I mean, you've got to get a lot of things going, and they didn't have a lot of effects. But now look with the cutting, you know, the water line keeps on creeping up. And then you had the squeaky shoes put in. This is all primitive in comparison, sound design, right? And the water goes up. Those are some of the choices we'll do, right? What is the threatening element? How do we do it? Interstitial moment. My God, they got there. We didn't have to show them getting there to the end of the dock. Can we go home yet? Now? Right? I love the shark in this moment, because for me the shark is basically saying, take your fucking dock. Who needs your fucking dock? I got your roast. I find him to be very smart at this point, not really very, I mean, he's threatening because he's also really smart to me. So let's hear some music here with this, please. Sorry. So the music's going down. No, not you. Right? The music is creating a sense of safety. And now.
Charlie, take my word for it. Don't look back. Swim, Charlie. Swim. Come on, Charlie. Swim. Swim, Charlie. Come on. To me, boy. Come on. Come on, Charlie. Swim. To me. Come on, Charlie. Keep swimming. Keep swimming, Charlie. Come on. A little more, Charlie. That'll work. To me, Charlie. That'll work. Come on, Charlie. Get up. I can't get up. I can't get up. I can't get up. Come on, Charlie. Help me. Come on, Charlie. Help me. Take your feet out of the water. Take your feet out. Can we go home now?
And that's Spielberg's actually, I mean, for really a tension-filmed, scary film that got a lot of people not to go to the beach for many, many years, and certainly around Martha's Vineyard and in Massachusetts. He likes to have these lilts, right? He does, I think, I mean, classic Bard, right? Shakespeare, there's always a little bit of tragedy and comedy, and vice versa. So when people get into this thing, I mean, this is just a pet peeve of mine, where people choose tone, like you have to get your tone right of your movie, and then everything becomes the same tone. The music is the same tone, the performances, and it's like, who cares? But that's a personal response that I've gotten, that I just find myself reacting to. Another thing about Spielberg, is that I mean, this is a story that was written about in a book called Easy Riders, Raging Bulls, about the films of the 60s. And during Coppola, De Palma, Scorsese, and Spielberg went to see a rough cut of Star Wars, the first Star Wars, by Lucas. And Lucas was there, and it had all the scenes inside. By the way, the scene where R2-D2 is being programmed and then Darth Vader comes in, his real voice sounds like this. It's really squeaky. I saw the original, it's really funny. And you hear Lucas going, okay, extras. He wasn't very good at directing actors, actually. More on Lucas later. They were driving back, okay, and also all the special effects that they later on did with the fighters and everything, what he used instead, because he didn't have that, I don't think he even had the budget. Coppola was helping him get that from Warner Brothers. I think it was Warner Brothers, or Universal. In any case, he used archival footage from Spitfire planes during the Second World War. So he kind of cut that stuff in for the pacing and getting it right. So then the four guys are driving back, right? Coppola, De Palma, Scorsese, and Spielberg. And Coppola, De Palma, and Scorsese are really bummed for Lucas. Poor guy. Just like, what a stinker. God, it's really sad. You know, they were just really, they felt so good about their own work, and they knew that he was just such a fucking loser. And it was only Spielberg who was going, no, it's going to be great. You know, he could see it. He could see it. And that ability to see, that's why judgment is not a place, because if you're in judgment, you're not actually open. You know, I mean, you could judge or, you know, and there's a difference between judgment and discernment. Judgment, inevitably, again, it's looking down on something and it's knowing better. Discernment is neutral. You're discerning that there is a shadow in the picture. You judge it to be bad, right? And it's very quick. And the smarter we are, the more, and we're highly trained to do this in academia, but it does not help in the creative process. And just notice it. Just notice. Write it down on a notepad. You know, I mean, it's not like you can't lobotomize yourself, but you can step back from that voice that is hindering a creative process of discovery. And that is why Spielberg, like him or not, why he's so popular. He does play. And, you know, sometimes he plays more likable than others. Back to Lucas as a director of actors, the only real good acting that ever occurred in Lucasfilm is called American Graffiti. And word on the street is that it's because the casting agent spent 5 months with that cast that you see there, calling them in again and again and again, and working them into an ensemble. And then they were ready, and they went, and Lucas shot it. So you don't have to be, by the way, good at everything. You should know how to exploit people. By the way, in the technical realm, do know how to exploit people. Graciously. You'll lose friends, but you'll gain fame, maybe. I used to say, find a techie, make friends for life. Now I say, find 3 techies, make friends for life. I mean, we don't have the technical overview. Some of us do, most of us don't. You just need to know who to call. Thank you. Would give you a last question. Do you have a last question? No, just gotta go. Bye. Have a good time. Before I go to any questions, are there any burning questions? Yes, here. Catch. Okay, ready? Very good.
So you were talking about, and even with the story you just told about the rough cut screening. So I'm a teacher, and we do a rough cut screening with our students. And I'm just wondering if you have any advice about when you think the best time is to bring in people to see the work.
Oh, that's good. And you're almost perfectly placed for me to go about screenings. Okay, so rough cuts, there are a lot of, I'm going to go back a little to producers. Producers, everybody will say, I really know how to watch a rough cut. Nobody knows how to watch a rough cut. I mean, because it's the pacing's usually off, and the performances are off. So, and also now in the digital age, it is expected that the sound be clean, right? I mean, you always have to do a disclaimer on sound and stuff. Then there are people who love to, I mean, we used to actually, when we were on flatbeds with the students, we would know that they were going insane because we'd see the grease pencil circles on the spigots that circled, you know, to pull the film through the gates. And now what I see, is that everybody's color correcting before they're actually, you know, it used to be one light work print that you'd work off of in film, and now they're color correcting. And, you know, to me, it's kind of like, okay, now that you've got that masturbation behind you, can you, like, you know, get, and the only problem with it is that if you're working with somebody and you actually have color corrected footage, the rendering, I mean, it just messes up a whole process, because you're not facile anymore. It goes red and you have to re-render all the time. At least on the systems I've been on, I don't know if anyone, you know, please, if you're a techie and you want a new friend. But I'm going to go a little bit forward because I think, so for one, you want to make sure your rhythms, the emotional lines and the rhythms are right. I mean, I wouldn't actually show a rough cut. I would show a fine cut. And of course, we could quibble about what is a rough cut, what's a fine cut. Editors, come, catch. What is a rough cut? What is a fine cut?
Rough cut is just the general idea, and a fine cut is when you start to formulate the ideas into an emotion more based on, I don't know.
Well, I think I would say a rough cut has everything in. Like, I try to make it as long as possible and to put everything in so I can see if it actually works, or if anything works, if there's anything interesting in there. And the fine cut is then my take on it, I would say.
That's good. I like that one. Sabina, you have anything to add? Nope, okay. So does that answer? So I'm going to actually look here, living and not knowing. This is like actors. We know what's coming next. I've already said that. Oh, but we do create magic. So I'm going to just cover this for a moment. This is something else I ask myself, especially in documentary, because in documentary you end up having a lot of scenes that repeat things that you saw before. And the art there is to build and to reveal information or reveal the evolving emotional field in a more suspenseful or a more dramatic way. So in choosing scenes, very often, does it move the story forward? Does it develop the character? Does it reflect the theme? if you have 2 out of the 3, it's good, 3 out of 3 is better, but because this is another way, it's kill your darlings. It's how do you put, and you're just putting it aside for the time being, right? It doesn't mean, I mean, sometimes we just really want to go, okay, I'm not going to use that at all. I don't have to worry my mind with it. And then you find yourself one day not knowing what to do, you're really kind of bored maybe. I like to say the best way to cut is hungover without a headache, because then you're certainly in your belly and not in your head. But you know, you don't know what to, you're just like really angry and passive aggressive towards your director in the whole production, whatever it might be, and you're just sitting there with your legs up and like, okay, I'm just gonna scroll through stuff, fuck them. You know, and then you see something and you just go, wow, God, yeah, I know where to use that now, right? So it's always good to go back before you end. And this is for you. This is about feedback screenings. So who hates feedback screenings? How painful are they? Come on. Guess how painful? A word. What? 10 out of 10 pain. Anything else? What limb do you feel is being chewed off by a high fish? What am I saying? Shark. Or those nails against the, right? Isn't that brilliant, though? I mean, the nails really gets you like, this is actually not as bad as that shark. Talk about contrast, right? Totally subliminally, right? But they knew how to do that. Oh, by the way, that was the actor, Roy, I'm forgetting his name. No, the other one. The one who plays Quinn. Robert Shaw, thank you. I love him. Don't know why I can't remember his name. It was his choice, by the way, to use the crackers. Made him show his teeth, right? Because he's like a shark, right? I love those little things. So feedback screenings. Feedback screenings are very painful, and I don't think the director should ever conduct a feedback screening. It should either be the editor or the producer. And what's very important is that you do not turn it into a discussion of what you actually are doing and why what you're doing is right. It's really very hard for a lot of people just to shut up, but the job is just to shut up. The director should sit in the back and feel the audience. And this is, so hand out paper and pencils, give the audience a moment to gather their thoughts after the film is shown. Before you screen it, talk about any holes that are there, that are filled, right? A scene that's going to be shot, we actually have a title card saying a scene is missing. Sometimes that does occur. We haven't scored it yet. It's certainly not a mixed track, and we don't have sound effects. You'll hear one of us scream, bang, because there is going to be a gun going off that we don't have the sound for yet. Whatever, right? You just make sure that they understand the gestalt of this beast. And then you kindly ask them not to ask questions, now, but to formulate their, because what you want to experience is their experience. And the moment you get asked a question, you go from here to here, and it's basically a defense. An explanation is just a defense. And you're giving information. I have seen information given to audiences that they then incorporate into what they thought they saw, and then they're criticizing that. It's magical in a way, because I don't know how it happens, but it does. So it's really important if you want to know how your film lands. And it's really beautiful if you can get over the pain of it. What's really beautiful is understanding that all your chattering minds worry about, all the superficial stuff, does not really come forward. What they talk about then is really what moved them, or what they didn't get. So these are no matter how painful, always thank them. Yes, it's true. Thank you for the pain. So these are the questions. The first two are really, not significant. I mean, you know, they stroke you or they take you down, right? What did you like, what you didn't like? Where were you bored? Very important. And where were you? Now, sometimes you have a really, like, Alien 3. Does anyone have Alien 3? Right? Is that in the Penal Colony? Anyone who's a Ripley fan? Penal Colony, right? Okay, I'm going to take some of you back here as best I can. There is and then we're going to go to questions. But there is a scene where all these prisoners are playing posse for Ripley, who's standing in this gate where there's going to be molten metal then thrown on to the alien. Now, the alien is not seen. We see his POV, and I was just watching it for the umpteenth time late at night, and there's these moments where I'm just watching something, and all of a sudden it's like, why don't I care? And that's always an interesting question to me. Why don't I care? And then I begin to analyze. And I thought for a long time, I was arguing in my head for years with Professor Dr. Murch, because I was convinced, because it was Fincher who had been coming from music videos, that it was the dislocation of space that was confusing me. But then several years go by, comes back up again, and then I realized, no, he was right. There was no emotional anchor in that scene. He even jumps to the POV of and it was a cute, really expensive shot of the alien, but he's not really, if he had anchored it more, if you see it next time, and just being more on Ripley, hearing the screams of these guys going, and not being in I believe in having your cake and eating it too, but at one point you need to decide where the emotional gravitas is. And, he didn't make a stinker. Everyone loves the series. It was just his choice. But for me, it was losing. It's just an interesting moment, because I always want to believe. I always want to be taken there. It's like, yes. And then, sometimes I don't care. And I'm not in a bad mood. And I didn't have a fight with anybody. And I'm not PMSing, which I haven't done in years anyway. So what the fuck's going on? So that would be a scene, for instance, where you're going, okay, chase scenes that are really dynamic, but all of a sudden you're not caring, or you're thinking, or someone in the audience is going, did I turn the stove off? Right? Got to do my laundry. Right? That is a distraction, and that's because you're not holding on to it. This is, of course, easier with shorts and documentaries to a certain extent than it is with features. If you noticed just 10 minutes of Bonnie and Clyde, and after 2 scenes, you're just like in it, right? You're not following anything anymore. So what you're getting from a feedback screening is that's why no questions. Like, what did you mean? Like, that the girl went into the room. It could be formulated as like, I thought when that girl went into the room that she was going to be slammed with a stake in her face, like the guy did the last time, right? That informs you better than like answering the question, why did you have her? It's like a nya question. Nya, 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 you did a stupid thing. It's like, shut the fuck up. That's why, and also do not have too many film professionals come and watch your films. For obvious reasons, right? Think of Coppola and Scorsese and De Palma just really feeling sorry for Lucas. That kind of stuff is not going to help you. Okay, so we have a little bit of time for questions. Oh, by the way, this is what I give you from Michael Rabiger from Focal Press. If you go into his books, it's actually what he uses for hypotheses when he's writing a treatment. I like to refocus the director in the editing room with this. And I also like, it's a good way in. He uses it also for ideation, but he actually expands on it. So I recommend at least looking into the book. If not, because, I know that directing the documentary is like $50, so I wouldn't. But it's a good way of not writing reams of paper that say the same thing over and over again that aren't evolving and allow you to go. So I'll give you an example just of something that I was working on. In life, I believe in unconditional love. It's also very good to use sayings, right? In my life, I believe in unconditional love. I will show this by making a film on Rebbe Nachas, the dog. Wait a second. On Rebbe Nachas, the dog, and how he tries to save Susie from a broken heart. Oh, there we go. I just want to get Rebbe Nachas, the dog, up here so that we really know what we're talking about. There we go. Oop. Okay, in life I believe in unconditional love. I will show this by making a film on Rebbe Nachas the dog and how he tries to save Susie from a broken heart. The main conflict will be between suicidal Susie and Rebbe Nachas the dog, who not only does not have thumbs, but who does not know what biped love is. Ultimately, I want the audience to feel what a loser Susie is and to understand that even losers deserve unconditional love. So that is just, bye-bye, Rebbe. That is just a way to kind of give it a roundness. I don't know when I'm saying that, I think you might be feeling, as I go through this whole thing, this is ridiculous. You might be seeing images or having interview questions for the dog or imagining what the suicide might look like or not. And it helps, and it's good to keep notes while you're, and it's not written in stone. It's just you follow a different theme each time, right? As you move through it. So that's just another little tool. I mean, this is all about trying to transmit things that will help you when you are there in that crazy, lovely place called the editing room. Questions?
So I have two questions. Maybe that's unfair, but maybe one. So one is just when I'm gathering advice for everywhere, which is what do you do when you go blind to your material, which is like I think happens to all of us if you edit something for too long. And the other one would be how do you understand directors when you see something different in their material than they see?
Well, you usually start making your own films when you start seeing a lot of different things in other people's material and you can't follow theirs. I mean, that's, I would always make the funny alternative film in my mind, or quip here and quip there. It did not cost me several jobs, right? And I ended up making my own films, which was actually a lot better than, being so distracted by other people's work. So I think that all editors should, and they have mostly, but make their own work. Because it allows us, it's humbling, right? It allows us to really understand that kind of shit feeling that directors feel after they've come off the set, as well as just not knowing, right? And pushing them to be more specific is just a truly unhelpful and almost a mean act that an editor can do to a director. The blindness, I mean, getting up, walking. Sometimes it's one of the things I was going to say before, it's actually when you're sitting around and with the feet up because you're feeling passive aggressive, or you're just feeling blind, not only being blind. Cutting a montage is always fun. I mean, give yourself some pleasure, right? Grab some music, do what, again, it goes back to playing. One of the big things about being an editor is always the tabula rasa, becoming, just wiping the slate clean and looking at it fresh. Another thing to do is to change your distance to the screen. Have somebody else in the room, right? Always drink water, go for a walk. Allow it too. Don't start judging it or beating up on yourself, but just do little things and find what really works best for you then. Maybe just bringing in a friend it's usually once you feel another energy in the room. I recommend dogs. They're extremely good. Does that answer? Okay, wait a second. Okay. It's dangerous, sorry about that.
So just, first of all, I want to say you're an amazing teacher.
Oh, thank you.
And it's so visible, you're passionate with research and everything else. And I'm saying this because it adds to my question. So when you asked about the curly thingy, I said that I saw it. And it's not that I'm trying to be very honest. But what actually happened in my mind, and I think it can add to your whole workshop, it was very interesting, then I focused only on that, was that I've noticed the connection between her not being, him not wanting her to be a waiter, and that woman being a waiter, but it was something I could feel the left side, of her face, but I did not see the detail, but I could feel that it was the left side of the waiter and the hair connected to the waiter idea. And I think I think that's an amazing flow into the editing.
That's a really, you're getting that, guys? It's just this, it's like if you took it away, you wouldn't have this kind of faceting. There's some kind of crystallization that's happening in the juxtaposition of those two, even if you don't know, right? So it's interesting, this thing about story, again, going back to Jaws, when Quinn is saying, I'm doing this alone, and even though, and you know that there is a communication going on between them, you're just feeling it when I point it out, but what we're doing in the editing room is following that moment for moment in a way you couldn't direct an actor. You can't direct an actor within 1/24th of a frame, of a second. You'd fucking be dead, right? You can't do, no, and that, you can't speak that fast, you know, it just doesn't work. And I haven't actually gone into it more, but I did hear rumor once that Dustin Hoffman had it in his contract that he got to sit in the editing room when his scenes were being cut. And any actor here, actors, you feel protective about some of your performances? You feel somebody fucked them up? Did you feel anyone enhanced them? There you go, make friends with that person. I think Marlene Dietrich always had her lighter, you know, the grip, the gaffer that she liked to light her the right way. Any other questions? Okay, well then, oh, we do have one. Okay, let's see.
What's the most important aspect that you've learned whilst editing a feature film?
What's the most important aspect you learn while editing a feature film? Have you edited a feature film? Have you?
No, I'm transitioning at the moment from a direct shot. So I'm transitioning towards a feature film. So I'm looking for an editor. So I'm just curious, as a full-time editor, what is the most important aspect that you've learned while editing a feature film?
Well, I can't answer that, but you do remind me of something. I can say that, I mean, this is a good segue, which might be interesting for you guys, is how do you interview an editor, and vice versa, how does an editor interview their director, so that you know. So I would ask an editor, you know, who showed me, by the way, never ask an editor for clips, a clip reel, because you probably won't get it, and they won't want to work with you. Because if you know anything about editing, you'll know that you have to see the whole film, or you cannot judge the editing, right? It's like a no-brainer, but it's really true. So never, you can ask it of a DP. DPs, do you like that, actually, when that gets asked? No. You don't count, Matthias. You're like Mr. Everybody, you know. Does VFX, does camera, does editing. God knows he probably does composing, too. So then I would ask an editor what they really fought for in the film that the director didn't want. Because I want somebody to be honest with me. That's me. I'd want somebody to be able to fight with me and also be honest and not go, oh no, it was all the director's idea. Because that's like, I don't want somebody where it's all the director's idea. I know better, right? And also, what did you fight for that didn't make it into the film? So that's, part of it is not the information. I mean, I could then think about how they're thinking about something. So if it's your first feature, you also want to be with somebody who has patience, has more experience, but also has patience for your mishigas, because we all have, you know, craziness, right? We all bring a little stuff into something. We were just talking about that this morning, you know, and how do we make room for it? So if you start micromanaging, like, I'll give you this story. I told some of the editors yesterday. Anthony Minghella had in his, when he was doing The English Patient, he was cutting on his own Avid and letting Murch cut on his Avid. Isn't that sweet? And of course he took Murch's cut. Because, you know, but it kept them occupied. They didn't have a dog. So I don't know if I'm not answering your question. And by the way, the reverse editors asking directors, it's, you know, how do they like to work? I mean, you want to say most of us editors like to work alone. So after rushes, and it's good always to be clear as to your work method. And I'm still getting used to this, by the way, but when you get the call and you're desperate because you always want the call, for the next film, you never say yes. You go, I'll get back to you. Because you really have to think about what's feeding this, I'm ready to take this piece of shit, abusive, director on because I'm feeling existential angst at this moment.
May I ask, what do you cut on? Are you a Premiere Pro or Avid or Final Cut?
Premiere, I've dabbled on. Premiere seems to have taken from Final Cut Pro 7 what was good. Final Cut Pro 10 I have not gone near. Avid I started on. And then I just have to get back into gear. I mean, what I loved about Final Cut Pro 7 was the tracking tool that you could make, get elbow room very nicely.
One more question, quick question. Do you cut analog footage?
I would love to again. It's so much fun.
So you've done it, basically?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Good. Good to know. Thank you.
Yep. Well, that was right at me. Oh, okay. There? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, feel free to leave. No one's going to take offense. How dare you?
Hi. When you watch a movie for pleasure, is it hard for you not to pay attention to the editing? Or do you sometimes think, I could have done better?
This is how I am in horror films, by the way. I still have not seen Get Out, even though I hear it's great, because I'm like this in horror films. And I'm like, I know how it's done. I know how it's done. Horror, unlike somebody here, is not my favorite. I just can't, my system can't tolerate it. So no, I only feel the editing when when something bumps me. Like there's a Richard Dreyfuss movie with Amy Irving where they're both in piano competition with each other. And I looked at it and I'm thinking, she's really a great physical actress at that point, but she's really dead in her dialogue, in her wooden, in her voice. And it could have been, and he's chewing up the scenery, stealing the scenes from her, so he's not being as generous. So that's what's going on. I'm looking at it and realizing he's not generous. And then I do research and I realize, oh, the director is the writer. No wonder he's not losing dialogue, because no writer ever wants, as a director, to lose his precious dialogue. Yeah, so sometimes that I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
But I usually, really, very, very often, I've looked at clips over again, and then I'm still discovering stuff. And what I love to do is look at it and take it into the editing room, and then do as much research as I can. To get more informed. But yeah, I guess I'm a nerd. Not just a people only teach because really they're inherently nerds. Back there. Okay, this has to be turned. Go! Whoa, I'm so sorry. I should have given you a heads up, love.
Okay. One last question. How do you know that the movie, or is there a certain point when you are sure, ideally with the director, yes, this movie, this feature film is finished from my side or from the editing side? So, or do you ever, or do you always have to think, the time is over, we did our best, but it's perhaps not finished? Or should there be always, would you say, should there be always a point where you as an editor say, that's the movie, that's how it should look, in my opinion?
Well, as my friend Alan Berliner likes to say, they can't pay us enough because we care. And editors take it home. They find it, they're dreaming about it. It goes into the shower with them, on the weekend when they're kissing their lovers. It's always coming up. So it's very hard to move on, and usually one does because the film is over from the production's end. I will say that there is usually one or two scenes that always have a problem, right? There are always that you'll solve the problem or you won't. I like when my friend calls me in to see if I can give feedback on something, fresh eyes, vice versa. So, but never be distressed if there's one or two scenes that are just not working, or even 5 scenes, because it's just the nature of the beast. The other thing I will add to that is John Huston used to say, you don't finish a film, you abandon it. But he was known also to move on, as Coppola did. He left the conversation with Gene Hackman in the hands of Murch, not having shot 15 pages of what was probably 120, so more than 10% of the film was not shot. And Walter Murch cut it together as that, if you know the conversation, there's this weird thing in the park, in the hotel room, and the blood, and the toilet bowl, and what the fuck, is he on drugs? And the betrayal and the whole, and he used the ethos of the mystery of surveillance and something nasty, right? Who's doing the surveillance kind of thing, and the surveillance of the surveillance. So he used that, and he just did what everybody in film school will tell you never to do, and probably not allow you to shoot the film that has a flashback or a dream sequence in it, right? That's the newest in film schools. They're really like it's like my attitude is, let them get it out of their system and then move on. Why like give them immediately a prohibition on it? But Murch saved the film. I mean, he made it happen without 15 minutes shot, right? And he did because he had to, right? And you go in, and those challenges, I mean, it's like there are no mistakes, there are only opportunities. It's easier said than done, of course. Right, I'm like, there's only opportunities, there's only opportunities. I don't know if that answered, but yeah, I mean, it's very hard. When it's over, and it's very hard to, very often directors have a hard time letting it go. And I was in the dinosaur age of doing reel-to-reel, where it was really shitty analog, in that analog, not Steenbeck analog, tape analog, where I was calling in edits to the online, trying to really make something that I knew wasn't work. That's another thing you could ask, your editors if you're interviewing them. Yes. Okay, somebody has to grab that. How are we doing on time, Kev? Yeah. No, it doesn't, but 5 minutes, okay. Any last questions?
So how do you accept to do a movie? You read the script, you talk with the director before committing to a work?
Yeah, definitely reading the script, definitely talking to the director and the production. We were talking today about what would be the criteria to take on a movie. Sometimes it's money, sometimes it's the project, and sometimes it's just the director. The project might be so-so. Like my friend Alan Berliner, I work with him as story consultant. He does his own cutting. I don't know if you know his work. He's an experimental documentarian. And he's also a lister, so he has like a lot of stuff that needs dramaturgical sculpting, but in the meantime, he's just listing. But I have total faith, and he's so much fun to work with. It's like it's just being truly in the sandbox. But the project, I think, is like, oh my God, how is he going to do this now? Now what he's doing is that he's cut out all 40 years of cutting out pictures from the New York Times. And it would be a great installation piece, which he does as well, installation art. But this is, how long do you have something on screen before you move on? That you say, it's find the number in from 1 to 100. Does he keep it 2 seconds on? It's crazy. I don't know how it's going to work, but I'll work with him. Yeah. One question back there.
Hi. So I directed my first short this year, and I was...
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I was bummed out by, when I saw the first rough cut by my editor, I couldn't relate to the material at all. And I wasn't sure if that was my inexperience or whether it's just the nature of seeing someone else's cut because someone else is going to see it differently. And then I did a rough cut myself, and then I went to another editor and we did it again. And I had a lot of problem actually communicating what I wanted without...
doing it.
Yeah, without the other editor finding the balance of getting what I want, and also giving the editor the freedom of doing what they want to bring to the project. So I find this balance very difficult and very tricky. And yeah, I just wondered whether there's, apart from going with your gut, if there's any points that you would say are important to just consider.
That they're always, I think it's the nature of the beast that it's your baby and somebody else is raising it all of a sudden. I mean, bringing it into the world. I mean, there's a whole thing about who owns it. Very rarely are we totally in sync with somebody else, So it's a question of trust, and you're learning now for the next time whether you learned something more from the second editor and that you'd want to work with that one again, or whether you'd want to work with the first editor, feeling more of your chops or more of the feet under you. Not that you should, right? But very often editors get fired in Hollywood to warn the directors. I mean, they're the ones by the studio, right? They're fired, and because the relationship's not working, because they're not delivering in something, because they're indulging the director in a way that the studio doesn't want to see. So, I mean, editors are actually truly expendable. But when directors find the editors that they like working with, like Alexander Payne said, yeah, he sleeps around with his producers and cinematographers, but he's monogamous with his writers and his editor. He's found and you'll find that too, that usually a lot of creative teams, I mean, we can go to Woody Allen, where he's gone through 3 different editors, but Bergman always had the same editor, or Kieslowski, Eva Small in Poland. So, Scorsese, yes, of all people, right. So you'll have to find, but and also allow that there's something that is moving you. Oh, Luba. So I think she's calling it. She's calling it. Don't you pee on my carpet. I hope that answers it, and more to be discovered, and thank you so much. Thank you.